Alright, so for Jam of the Week, Woodshed of the Week, I'm going to be talking about the Augmented scale, and then we're going to play it over Stella by Starlight. So what is the Augmented scale? It's a symmetrical scale, and you build it by going up a half step, and then up a minor third, and then repeat. Is the easiest way to think of it. So let's start on B. Go up a half step to C, up a minor third to E flat, etc. Up a half step, up a minor third, up one more half step, and then you're back to B with a minor third. Okay? So that whole scale, right? Faster, it's like, that's the Augmented scale. And it's called that because there's two augmented triads right next to each other. That's the B, and that's the C. Okay? It's called a symmetrical scale because it's built on those symmetrical steps, right? Up a half, up, then up 3 half steps, right? So the cool thing about a symmetrical scale is that you can only go so far before it repeats itself. There's only 4 total augmented scales because once you start on B, by the time you start the next one on E flat, you have the same scale. So here's the B scale, and here's the E scale, E flat scale. Right? It's the same scale, I'm just starting it transposed. So the cool thing about that is you get all these shapes that repeat on top of each other. It's very much like that diminished scale, which you're probably familiar with. So inherent in these in these scales are major triads. So in the one that I just picked, there's 3 major triads: C major, E major, and A flat major. You might be familiar with that relationship. They're all a major third apart. That's sort of how the tune Giant Steps is built on. So, the very first lick that most jazz musicians learn on the Augmented scale, including myself, I remember this very cliche lick, is to take these triads and then move them down. So it sounds like this. Right? So I was just arpeggiating triads in root position, those 3 that I described before. Okay? So how do you use this? Well, because it has those triads in it, it has a very familiar sound. But because the triads are dissonant with one another, you get a lot of notes that are outside the changes. But because it's structurally such a beautiful unit, you can use it to solo and make things sound good even though you're playing outside the changes. So the trickiest thing is figuring out, well, which augmented scale do I use for each chord? And what I always try to do is I try to outline a very special chord in jazz, which is the major 7 sharp 5 chord. Okay, so let's build a major 7 sharp 5 chord starting on C, right? So that would just be C, E, G sharp, and B, right? You've heard that before, right? So the key is that is an upper structure for like a million jazz chords, and you have to figure out which one it is. So, for example, if you have an A in the bass, and then you put that above it, right? You get like the James Bond chord, right? That's like it's like a major 7th with a major 9, but a minor 3rd, right? So if you have some kind of A minor shape, you could totally use that augmented scale. Right? That sounds awesome. Now, it would also work if you, that same scale and that same right hand shape, if you had an F sharp half diminished chord because of the 9th and the 11th and all that stuff in it. Right? That sounds familiar, like Bill Evans. Right? Right, so that's like a 2 chord. Then also, if you had like a D7, like with the sharp 11 type stuff going on, there's like the D shape on the bottom, right? Same thing. That's got the sharp 11, the 9th, and all that. And then finally, if you want an A flat altered, right? You've heard that too. Right? So basically, if you can create that beautiful right-hand shape over the chord, then you're golden. So let's take a look at Stella by Starlight. And you'll notice that the first 2 chords, you have a minor 2-5. So immediately I'm thinking the augmented scale that starts on A and B. thinking on the next chord, which is an A7 altered. Right? So that's how I'm thinking, right? And the way to play it, you know, either mess around or really enjoy those triads. Like you can kind of tonicize each triad. But that's like a very basic tonicization of a triad. And then the other thing you can do is, because this scale has sort of melodic minor ring to it, is you can easily shift between using an augmented scale to using a very more familiar sort of melodic minor taste. So for example, the B section of Stella by Starlight, where you start with sort of like a G altered shape, right? Right, you hear that? G altered. So you can start with the augmented scale. Still kind of the same shape. When you get to the C minor, you can go to a more traditional melodic minor. And then, you know, you go to the A flat 7 with the sharp 11. And then you're back home in B flat. So if you kind of see what I did there, it was sort of half augmented, half melodic minor. All right. So I'm just going to play a chorus. I hope that was somewhat helpful. And, you know, you can kind of hear a little bit of this stuff going on. So here's Stella's by Starlight. So yeah, I got a little diminished in the B section. Sorry about that, but you know, I hope that makes a little bit of sense, and you know, it can kind of give you a modern flair to your jazz solos. And that's it for today. Thank you, Woodshed of the Week.